The first words my neighbor ever said that truly changed my life were spoken across an old wooden fence. "I could have treated you far better than she ever did." Olivia's voice was calm, almost gentle, but those words stopped everything around me. Behind me, my girlfriend Vanessa was loading the last of her suitcases into a black SUV. A man named Eric stood beside the open trunk, carefully arranging her bags as if the end of our relationship was just another item on a checklist. I should have laughed. A man who spent his life moving heavy furniture was supposed to know how to carry difficult moments. Instead, I stood frozen in my own driveway, unable to think of a single thing to say. Then Olivia looked directly at me and asked the question that would stay with me for months. "Daniel, what has she ever truly done for you?" The neighborhood suddenly felt silent. It wasn't an insult toward Vanessa. It wasn't jealousy. It was a simple question that I couldn't answer. Not because I didn't love Vanessa. Because every answer that came to my mind was another example of something I had done for her instead. The late afternoon sun covered our quiet Nebraska street with a warm golden light. Dust floated through the air while a soft breeze pushed dry leaves across the pavement. Olivia remained on her side of the fence. She didn't move closer. She didn't try to comfort me. She simply waited. That old waste, high fence had separated our backyards for more than a year. We had exchanged friendly greetings there, talked about the weather, complained about noisy dogs, and laughed about trash collection days. Nothing more. I stood on my side wearing my worn work boots and a faded gray moving company shirt that still smelled like cardboard and furniture polish. Behind me, Vanessa handed another suitcase to Eric. He accepted it with both hands. A second later, the trunk slammed shut. Olivia never looked at them. Her eyes stayed on me. "What has she ever done for you?" she repeated softly. I rubbed the back of my neck without realizing it. My shoulders were stiff. There was packing tape stuck to my jeans. My relationship of 2 years was driving away. The first answer that entered my mind was painfully small. "Well," I said quietly, "she let me keep paying the electric bill in my own name." For a moment I forced a weak smile. "I guess I'm pretty easy to beat." Olivia's lips curved slightly, but the sadness in her eyes remained. "Daniel," she said, "that's an incredibly low standard." She didn't lecture me. She didn't step across the fence. She simply nodded once, turned around, and walked back toward her porch. A minute later, the SUV disappeared at the end of the street. Everything became quiet again. Somewhere nearby, a lawn sprinkler clicked over and over in the evening air. I stayed in the driveway much longer than necessary. Only then did I realize how badly my shoulders hurt. At first I blamed years of lifting furniture. Then I understood the truth. I had been carrying something much heavier than couches and dining tables. For months, I had been waiting for the next request, the next favor, the next apology, the next chance to prove I was worth keeping. That weight had become part of who I was. My name is Daniel Carter. I was 31 years old, and I owned a small moving company. Around our part of Nebraska, people called me whenever something was too heavy, too valuable, or too difficult to move safely. I knew how to carry grand pianos without scratching them. I knew how to fit oversized sofas through impossible doorways. I knew how to protect other people's most valuable belongings. What I didn't know was how to stop proving my own value by making everyone else's life easier. For 2 years, I believed love meant solving problems. I fixed broken shelves. I paid bills. I drove wherever Vanessa needed to go. I carried every burden she handed me. Whenever she apologized after asking for too much, I smiled and said it wasn't a problem. I called it being dependable. Looking back now, I was simply afraid that if I ever stopped being useful, I would stop being loved. Olivia Brooks lived next door. She was 29 and owned a small breakfast cafe on Main Street. Every morning before sunrise, I heard her back door close while I was making coffee before work. I knew she worked long hours. I knew she managed employees, difficult customers, and endless deliveries with remarkable patience. I also knew she was the kind of woman a man quietly admired from a distance because his heart already belonged to someone else. Or at least, That's what I believed at the time. The morning after Vanessa left, I stepped onto my back porch, just before sunrise with a cup of coffee in my hand. The empty house behind me felt strangely unfamiliar. As I looked toward the fence, something white caught my attention. A folded piece of paper rested on the corner post, held down by a small smooth stone. I picked it up. Written neatly across the front were just a few words. No breakfast conversations before 7. A man deserves at least one peaceful morning. Olivia, before I realized it, I laughed. It wasn't a big laugh. Just enough to remind me that I still could. I folded the note carefully and slipped it into my back pocket. For the first time since Vanessa had driven away, going to work didn't feel quite as lonely. 3 days later, my phone buzzed while I was checking the week's moving schedule inside our warehouse. It was a message from Vanessa. I left 4 storage boxes in your garage. I need them at Eric's apartment before Saturday. Thanks. No greeting. No, how are you? No acknowledgement that we had broken up less than a week earlier. Just another task waiting for me to complete. My fingers automatically moved toward the keyboard. Sure, I can bring them Thursday evening. I had typed half the sentence before I stopped. Why was I still doing this? Before I could answer myself, a familiar voice interrupted my thoughts. Busy morning. I looked up. Olivia was standing near the warehouse entrance wearing blue jeans and a light denim jacket. She carried a clipboard under one arm and smiled, as if she had simply happened to be passing by. I wasn't expecting to see you here, I said. I know, she replied. I'm here because I need help. I laughed quietly. That sounds dangerous. It probably is. She held up the clipboard. The community harvest breakfast is next weekend. The town doubled our guest list yesterday, and now I need someone to move tables, cooking equipment, and supplies from the cafe to the community hall. That won't take long, I said. I'll bring my truck after work. Olivia shook her head. No. I blinked. No, I didn't ask for a favor. She looked directly at me. I asked for a professional service. I frowned. It's only a few blocks, and your business still deserves to be paid. I opened my mouth to argue, but she continued before I could speak. Daniel, you own a company? You pay your employees. You pay for fuel. You pay insurance. So why should your time suddenly become free just because we're neighbors? Her words caught me completely off guard. Nobody had ever argued with me, because I wasn't charging enough. I scratched my head awkwardly. I don't know, maybe $60. She smiled immediately. Perfect. You didn't even negotiate. I wasn't trying to get a discount. She held out her hand. I was trying to respect your work. For a second, I simply stared at her hand. Then I shook it. Her handshake was firm, confident. Not because she was trying to prove anything, but because she meant every word she had said. As she turned to leave, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Vanessa. Don't forget the wall mirror too. Olivia glanced toward the screen but quickly looked away. She never asked who was texting. She never gave advice. She simply smiled. I'll see you Friday at 4. Then she walked back toward her car. I looked down at my phone again. The unfinished reply was still waiting. For the first time in years, I deleted it. Not because I had suddenly become brave. Because, for the first time, someone had reminded me that my time actually had value. That evening, I found myself standing by the old fence again, just after sunrise. Olivia was already outside with a coffee mug in her hands. She looked over and smiled. Good morning? Morning. She raised an eyebrow. You look like a man who's been thinking too much. I probably have. She laughed softly. That's usually exhausting. It is. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. Finally, I asked, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did it matter so much that you paid me yesterday? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked across the quiet backyard as birds landed on the fence between us. My father owned a small repair shop, she said. He worked every day except Christmas. She smiled faintly. People always expected discounts because they knew him. He rarely said no. What happened? I asked. He got tired. She looked back at me. not because fixing engines was hard. Because everyone appreciated what he could do, but very few appreciated him. Her words settled somewhere deep inside me. I promised myself I'd never treat good people that way. The morning breeze moved through the trees. I looked down at my coffee. I don't think anyone has ever said something like that to me. Maybe someone should have. We both smiled. Then she pointed toward my right shoulder. Does it still hurt? I looked up, surprised. What? You keep rubbing it. I hadn't even noticed. It's nothing. She gave me a look that said she didn't believe me. You're terrible at answering simple questions. I've been told that before. Then let me ask another one. She folded her arms. When was the last time you took an entire day off? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. She laughed. I'll take that as my answer. For the first time in a long time, someone wasn't asking me what I could do for them. They were asking whether I was taking care of myself. And somehow, that felt far more difficult to answer. Friday arrived faster than I expected. At exactly 4 o'clock, I parked my moving truck behind the community hall. The parking lot looked like controlled chaos. Volunteers carried folding chairs through the side entrance. Delivery vans came and went every few minutes. Someone inside was already testing the sound system, and every few seconds a microphone squealed loud enough to make people cover their ears. I climbed out of the truck and found Olivia standing near the loading door with a clipboard tucked under one arm. The moment she saw me, she smiled. You came right on time. I try to make a habit of it. I noticed. She pointed toward a stack of folding tables. Those first. After that we'll move the warming cabinets. You've already planned everything. She laughed. If I don't, 20 volunteers will invent 20 different plans. Fair point. For the next 2 hours, we worked side by side. My crew handled the heavy equipment while Olivia directed everyone with calm confidence. She never raised her voice. She never rushed people. Yet somehow everyone listened. I had spent years believing leadership meant carrying the heaviest load yourself. Watching Olivia, I realized real leaders didn't do everything. They made everyone around them feel capable. Around 6 o'clock she walked over carrying 2 bottles of cold water. She handed one to me. Break. I'm fine. She crossed her arms. That wasn't a question. I looked at the bottle. I'll drink after we finish. She smiled patiently. And when exactly is finished, I looked around the hall. There are still tables. And after the tables, the decorations. And after those, the food deliveries. She nodded slowly. So, never. I couldn't help smiling. When you put it that way, I usually do. She pointed toward an empty chair near the stage. 5 minutes. We're behind schedule. No. She glanced at her watch. We're 3 minutes ahead. I blinked. You actually know that. I've checked 3 times. I laughed. Fine. I sat down. It felt strangely uncomfortable. Not because the chair was hard. Because sitting still while other people worked felt almost wrong. My eyes automatically searched for something else to carry. Olivia noticed immediately. You look nervous. I feel lazy. You've been lifting tables for 2 hours? I can keep going. I know. She took a sip of water. But you don't always have to. Her words stayed with me. For years I had measured my worth by how tired I was at the end of each day. The more exhausted I felt, the more useful I believed I had been. Nobody had ever challenged that idea before. A few minutes later, Richard, one of the town volunteers, walked past carrying a box of paper plates. He grinned when he saw me sitting. I never thought I'd see Daniel Carter taking a break. Olivia answered before I could. Professionals need maintenance too. Richard laughed. I'll remember that. After he walked away, I looked at her. You didn't have to defend me. I wasn't defending you. She shrugged. I was stating a fact. We finished unloading just before sunset. The hall finally looked ready. Rows of tables stretched across the room. Kitchen equipment stood neatly against one wall. Everything was exactly where it belonged. Olivia looked around with quiet satisfaction. I think we're ready. You planned this well. I had help. My crew mostly lifted things. They lifted the right things because someone knew how. She looked at me. And because someone showed up when they said they would? Simple words. Yet somehow they meant more than compliments ever had. As I packed the last moving straps into my truck, my phone vibrated again. Vanessa. I stared at her name without opening the message. Olivia noticed my expression. You don't have to answer right now. I know. Then don't. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. For the first time. It stayed there. Olivia smiled. I have something for you. She walked inside the hall and returned carrying a small paper bag. What's this? Your payment. I frowned. I already sent the invoice. I know. This isn't money. Curious, I opened the bag. Inside was a warm cinnamon roll wrapped in bakery paper. On top rested a handwritten note. For Daniel. Not for the moving company. Eat before you drive home. I looked up. You made this? I did. I can't accept free food? She laughed. I wasn't selling it. I still feel like I owe you. Her smile softened. No. She shook her head gently. Kindness isn't always a transaction. For a moment neither of us spoke. The evening sun painted the parking lot in soft orange light. A cool breeze carried the smell of fresh bread from the cafe across the street. I folded the note carefully and slipped it into my shirt pocket. You keep every note, don't you? She asked. I guess I do. Why? I smiled to myself. Because nobody's ever written one to me before. She looked away for a second. When she turned back, her eyes were warmer than before. Then I suppose I'll have to keep improving my handwriting. I laughed. A real laugh. The kind that came naturally instead of out of politeness. As I climbed into my truck, I realized something that both comforted and frightened me. For the first time since my relationship had ended, I wasn't looking forward to getting home. I was already looking forward to seeing Olivia again, tomorrow morning by the old wooden fence. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. For a few seconds, I forgot everything that had happened over the past week. Then I looked around the quiet house. Vanessa was gone. The silence was still there, but somehow it didn't feel as heavy anymore. I made myself a cup of coffee and stepped into the backyard. The air was cool, and the sun had only begun to rise. Olivia was already outside, watering the flowers beside her fence. She noticed me and smiled. You're earlier than usual? I couldn't sleep. She turned off the hose. Bad dreams, I shrugged. More like old habits. She rested one arm on the fence. You've spent a long time taking care of other people. I guess I have. What are you doing for yourself today? I laughed. I don't think anyone has ever asked me that. I'm asking now. I looked down at my coffee. I honestly don't know. She nodded as if that answer made perfect sense. Then maybe today is a good day to find out. After breakfast, I headed to the warehouse. The crew was already loading the first truck. Louise tossed me a clipboard. Everything ready for the Harper move? Almost. As I checked the schedule, my phone buzzed. Vanessa. I stared at the screen for several seconds before opening the message. Can we talk? Just for a few minutes. No request, no favor. Just 4 words. A week ago I would have answered immediately. Instead, I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Work came first. More importantly, my peace came first. That afternoon, after finishing our last delivery, I drove past Main Street. The Prairie Table Cafe was busy. Through the front window, I saw Olivia laughing with an elderly customer while carrying 3 plates at once. She looked tired, but she also looked happy. Not because everything was easy, because she loved what she had built. I almost kept driving. Instead, I parked across the street. When the lunch rush slowed down, she stepped outside with 2 paper cups. I had a feeling you'd stop. You made coffee before I even asked. She handed me one. I know your timing. We sat on a bench overlooking the quiet street. For a while, neither of us spoke. People walked by. Cars rolled slowly through town. It felt peaceful. Finally, I broke the silence. I got a message from Vanessa today. Olivia looked at me, but didn't ask what it said. She simply waited. I didn't answer. How did that feel? Strange. Why? Because saying nothing felt harder than saying yes. She nodded. Boundaries usually feel uncomfortable before they feel normal. I smiled. You always have an answer. No. She smiled back. I've just made enough mistakes to recognize them. A light breeze moved through the trees. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. Can I ask you something? Of course. When you help people, do you ever stop and ask whether they're helping you too? I thought about the late night phone calls, the unpaid favors, the endless promises, the feeling that my value depended on how much I could carry. Slowly, I shook my head. I never asked. I know. She looked toward the street. But maybe it's time you started. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of being alone. I was afraid of returning to the version of myself who believed love had to be earned every single day. And deep down, I knew I couldn't go back. The next week became the busiest one my company had seen all year. Every morning started before sunrise. Every evening ended long after dark. Usually, I would have pushed myself until my back hurt and my hands shook from exhaustion. This time was different. Whenever the workday ended, I went home. Not because I was tired. Because I had finally learned that not every empty hour needed to be filled with someone else's problems. One Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang while I was organizing invoices. Vanessa. I stared at her name for several seconds before answering. Hello. Her voice sounded softer than I remembered. Daniel, can we meet? What for? I just think we should talk. There was a long silence. Months ago, I would have canceled every plan just to make time for her. Now I check my calendar. I'm free Thursday evening. 30 minutes. She seemed surprised. Only 30. I have dinner afterward. That part was true. Olivia and I had planned to try a small Italian restaurant that had just opened downtown. For the first time in years, I wasn't canceling my own life for someone else's convenience. Thursday arrived. Vanessa was already sitting at a quiet coffee shop when I walked in. She smiled. You look different. I feel different. She looked down at her coffee. I've been thinking. So have I? For several minutes we talked about work, mutual friends, and everything except the reason we were there. Finally she sighed. I didn't realize how much you did for me. I nodded politely. I didn't realize either. I miss you. Those 3 words would have changed everything a few weeks earlier. Now, they felt like they belonged to another life. I cared about you, I said. I really did. But I wasn't happy. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. I wasn't asking you to leave. No. I smiled sadly. You were asking me to disappear a little more every day. She lowered her head. Neither of us argued. Neither of us blamed the other. Some relationships don't end because someone is evil. Sometimes they end because 2 people slowly become strangers while trying to make each other happy. I stood. I truly hope your life goes well. She looked up. So this is goodbye. It already was. I left the cafe feeling lighter than I had in years. Not because I had won. Because I had finally stopped trying to fix something that was already over. That evening I met Olivia at the little Italian restaurant. She smiled the moment I walked in. I was starting to think traffic had kidnapped you. I had one last conversation to finish. She studied my face for a second. Are you okay? I thought about the question. Really thought about it. Then I smiled. Yeah. I think I finally am. She reached across the table and gently touched my hand. I'm proud of you. Not because I had said goodbye. Not because I had chosen her. Because I had finally chosen myself. Dinner lasted almost 3 hours. We laughed more than we ate. We argued about which dessert was better. She insisted cheesecake always wins. I defended chocolate cake with unreasonable confidence. When the restaurant closed, neither of us wanted the evening to end. We walked slowly through the quiet streets of town. The summer air was warm. Store lights reflected on the sidewalks. After a while, Olivia stopped walking. Can I tell you something? Always. The first day I spoke to you across that fence, she smiled. I wasn't trying to rescue you. I know. I just wanted you to see yourself the way everyone else already did. And how was that? She looked into my eyes. A's a good man. Not because of what you carry. Not because of what you give. Simply because you're you. For a moment I couldn't speak. Nobody had ever described me without mentioning my work. Without talking about how dependable I was. Without listing everything I had done. She saw me. Just me. As we reached my house, We stopped beside the old wooden fence that had started everything. Olivia laughed softly. Funny, isn't it? What is? A fence that once separated two neighbors. She looked at me with a smile. Ended up bringing them together. I smiled back. I think it was never really the fence. What was it then? The courage to start one honest conversation. This time, neither of us looked away. A few months passed before I realized my life no longer revolved around proving my worth. The change wasn't dramatic. It happened in small moments. I started taking Sundays off. I stopped checking work emails during dinner. When my crew offered to handle a job without me, I let them. At first, it felt strange. Then it felt peaceful. One Saturday morning I arrived at the warehouse later than usual. Luis was already directing the crew. He looked over and grinned. Look who's finally trusting us. I laughed. I guess I had to learn eventually. You definitely did. The trucks rolled out, one after another while I stayed behind to finish paperwork. Months earlier, I would have been on the first truck, lifting every heavy piece myself. Now I understood something important. A good leader doesn't need to carry everything alone. Around noon, my phone rang. It was my mother. I heard you're actually taking weekends off. I smiled. News travels fast. It does in small towns. She paused before speaking again. You sound happy. The question caught me by surprise. Happy. Nobody had asked me that in a long time. I think I am. I'm glad. So am I. That afternoon I walked toward Main Street. The cafe was full. Families filled every table. The smell of fresh bread drifted through the open windows. Olivia spotted me as soon as I stepped inside. She walked over with flour on one cheek and laughed. Don't say it. I wasn't going to. Yes, you were. I smiled. Maybe a little. She rolled her eyes playfully. I'm closing early today. Oh, I have plans? What kind of plans? She smiled. You'll see. An hour later she locked the cafe door and handed me a small paper bag. Come on. Where are we going? It's a surprise. We drove outside town until the buildings disappeared behind us. Finally she parked beside a quiet hill overlooking the wide Nebraska fields. The wind moved gently through the tall grass. The sky stretched farther than I could remember. She spread a blanket on the ground. Inside the paper bag were sandwiches, fruit, homemade cookies, and 2 cups of coffee. I looked at her. You planned all this? I wanted one afternoon where neither of us had to hurry. We sat together watching the clouds drift across the sky. No phones, no schedules, no deliveries, no deadlines. Just silence, comfortable silence. After a while she leaned her head lightly against my shoulder. You know, she said, the first time I saw you, I thought you looked lonely. I was. But you smiled every time someone asked for help. I thought that was my purpose. She looked up at me. And now, I smiled. Now I think my purpose is simply to live a good life with people who value me. She squeezed my hand. I like that answer. The sun slowly began to set. Golden light covered the fields around us. I reached into my pocket. There was something I wanted to ask. She laughed softly. I had a feeling. I pulled out a small wooden keychain shaped like the old fence that separated our backyards. I had carved it myself during quiet evenings at home. One side was engraved with a single word, trust. I handed it to her. This isn't an engagement ring. She laughed. I noticed. It's something better for where we are. She turned the keychain over in her hands. What does it mean? It reminds me of the place where everything changed. The fence. I nodded. It wasn't something that kept us apart. It became the place where we learned to be honest. She smiled, her eyes shining in the evening light. I'll keep it forever. I hope so. She slipped the little keychain into her jacket pocket. Then she reached for my hand. You know what I love most about us? What? You never try to impress me anymore. I ran out of ideas. She laughed. No. You finally realized you don't have to earn your place beside me. I looked across the endless fields. For years I believed love had to be paid for with effort, with sacrifice, with endless giving. I couldn't have been more wrong. Real love didn't ask me to become less. It encouraged me to become more. As the last sunlight disappeared beyond the horizon, we stood together and began walking back toward the truck. Our hands stayed together naturally. No promises. No pressure. Just two people choosing each other every single day. Months later, the old wooden fence between our backyards was finally replaced. Not because it was broken, because we no longer needed it. Our neighbors joked that it was the shortest home improvement project in town. Maybe they were right. The fence had done its job. It introduced two strangers. Everything after that was built on honesty, respect, and the simple choice to keep showing up for each other. Sometimes people ask me what changed my life. They expect me to mention the day my relationship ended, or the day I met Olivia, but the truth is much simpler. My life changed the moment I stopped asking, "How can I make people stay?" and started asking, "Who makes me feel at home when I simply show up as myself?" That question gave me an answer I had been searching for my entire life. And every morning, when I wake up beside the woman who saw my value before I ever did, I know I finally found it.